Welcome back to True Words, a Shingon Buddhist podcast. I'm Reverend Kosho Finch, and this is episode 17. In this episode, I'd like to talk to you about compassion, meditation, and the spiritual path. Most of us probably weren't raised in Buddhist households. I know I wasn't. I could say I was raised loosely Catholic, so when I set out to learn about Buddhism, I had to learn new terminology, and often the ideas I was reading weren't translated into English or weren't often fully explained in the books I was reading. Definitely one of these was compassion. In the early days of my Buddhist exploration, I assumed that it was a general feeling of kindness and just being a good person and extending that idea to others. I had no idea how much I had limited my understanding of the Buddha Dharma through this more shallow understanding of compassion. In my experience, people often come to Buddhism for one of two reasons. They either have a traditional view and engage in Buddhist practice from a community cultural connection, or for many of the same reasons Buddhism is practiced in traditional context, meaning practice as a faith-based religion. Or they come from the mindfulness vein in order to either address stress and physical ailments, issues in life, or assimilate bits and pieces into a Western belief system. Often, this vein is an attempt to create an overtly secular form that jettisons traditional practices, generally because they are misunderstood or maybe remind us too much of a spiritual system that we may have left behind. There seems to be a trend towards understanding Buddhist meditation or Buddhist practice only from the perspective of practical benefit. We see many medical and counseling professionals suggesting meditation for a variety of health-related reasons, or else meditation is marketed toward becoming more effective and successful in your work or occupation. We see many business leaders touting meditation for this reason. Even the military utilizes mindfulness. So we have to ask whether Buddhist concepts have application to competition and aggression in this way. While some of these may be worthwhile applications of Buddhist meditation at some level, they are still scratching the surface of what's possible. Often, when I speak of secularizing these practices, I'm referring to a process of picking and choosing from Buddhism the things that are comfortable for us, that don't challenge our worldview or assumptions or our comfort zone. Buddhism, Buddhist ethics, and ideas have a great deal to offer the modern Western world, in my opinion, because they have a different starting point than the ethics in other religious systems. And that should be an ongoing conversation, not a one-time adaptation to today. Things change. The Buddhist teaching is infinitely adaptable to the human condition, but only if its depth is maintained and sustained. Too much adaptation and understanding only through the lens of Western psychology, rehabilitation science, or medicine brings us back to normal, a state where we are once again good consumers, perhaps physically healthy, or what the world around us validates as happy and well-adjusted. This is ignoring the real purpose of Buddhist meditation, the true change and growth that is possible through the Buddhist path, the potential to become more than that, to leave behind these states and have lasting happiness or health, not dependent on outside sources. You've probably heard of compassion before. Many of the world's great religions encourage this quality. So in this episode, we'll take a deeper look at the idea from a Buddhist perspective. So today, we'll talk about the importance of compassion, both within Buddhism generally, and why this concept is important, actually a key component, and specifically its place within Shingon practice. I especially want to distinguish meditation practice generally from Buddhist meditation. Why should we practice Buddhist meditation? What does it offer? Are all meditation practices created equal? Is it mindfulness the same as Buddhist meditation? So I should mention up front that compassion is a topic that is woven into all Buddhist practice, and no podcast or single lecture can fully encompass or provide an appreciation for this concept. So I hope this serves as a bit of inspiration to read more, study more, learn more about compassion in the Buddhist context. So with the understanding that some terms in Buddhism probably need a bit of clarification, what do we mean when we say compassion? First, why do people generally seek out meditation practice? Usually as an antidote to some issue they're facing. Most often, I hear that because of something that is an obstacle to some other goal, someone wants to learn meditation. For example, someone is dealing with stress, medical problems, maybe even up to and including addiction recovery. There's nothing wrong with that. These can be very good applications of meditation, but that presentation of meditation is only part of the depth of the meditation tradition offered within Buddhism. Many also seek meditation for the bodily sensation aspect. Many early meditators in the West and those interested in Eastern religion also experimented with mind-altering substances. So the idea that this was a consciousness expanding aspect became associated with Eastern religious practice, including Buddhism. Recently, someone commented that they did not want to attend a meditation class because they were hesitant to have their idea and conception about meditation challenged, nor did they want their idea of meditation challenged or expanded beyond their idea of a retreat from the troubles of the world. These motivations are both natural, but also potentially limiting. If we see or observe something distasteful, negative, or unfortunate in life or experience something that we are not happy about, it's our natural inclination to withdraw from this. Often, when we read or hear compassion, we think only of a feeling towards others, something similar to goodwill, kindness, or friendliness. And while these ideas are present, we are talking here about something much deeper. Compassion is generally coming from the translation of the Sanskrit bodhicitta. In Mahayana Buddhism, bodhicitta is synonymous with the awakened mind, enlightenment itself, and the aspiration to attain enlightenment. Perhaps we can translate this idea as compassion, because that aspiration is not solely focused on oneself, but also others. So take a moment to think about your most important goal, perhaps something that you want to do in life. Maybe that's travel, obtaining an academic degree or a certain position, a quantity of wealth, an item, or property. What takes up most of your mental process? Perhaps it isn't the aspiration for enlightenment. So now, speaking about compassion more generally, it's a question of geography. Do we locate our aspiration only within ourselves and upon ourselves, or outside ourselves and inclusive of all other beings? This is perhaps the major difference between traditional Buddhist views and part of the conversation happening as Buddhism enters Western culture. Ours is overtly a culture based on materialism and individualism, so it's natural to view the Buddhist teaching from this perspective. We think some of these tools imported with Buddhism are of interest, and applying our cultural perspective and tendencies, we next ask, what can this do for me? Can I use some of this to make myself more wealth, beauty, my body healthier, my career more successful, my social interactions more fulfilling? In short, we look for abundance from a tradition that traditionally espoused reduction. The other side is, how do I market this or profit from this? The result is we see a great deal of teaching with an overt profit motive, or integration into some sort of business model. How do we reconcile these new ideas with the free market of our Western society? When we bring this analysis to the Buddhist tradition, or real human needs, we find that the market system is not appropriate to all areas of human activity. We don't apply this model, or should not apply it, to the needs and development of children. Should we apply an economic analysis to emergency service, allowing fire or paramedics to quantify your value to society before engaging in rescue operations? Buddhism takes the least profitable yet broadest approach in this area, teaching that all people are not only worthy of saving, but that generating the aspiration to save all people has an appreciably positive and important component for our own journey on this path. And a tremendous quantity of Buddhist literature and practice is focused on this area. How we generate compassion, sustain compassion for others, how to identify obstacles to compassion, Even more skillfully, what about those emotions or mind states that appear to be helpful to others, but which are in fact cleverly crafted camouflage for our ego and self-centered desires, and areas we really want to avoid opening up? One of the biggest areas where I hear people voice struggle with the idea of compassion is in the area of righteous anger, what I'll call the problem of righteous anger. It's often easy to identify those that we think don't deserve our love, compassion, or consideration. It's not hard to find an issue, cause, situation, or even viral video that competes for our attention and our emotional response. Perhaps viral is a good description of such videos. They largely aren't good for our emotional states or mental calm. They demand that we react, come with titles that tell us we won't believe it, or that another injustice will go unnoticed or unpunished unless we generate rage and anger. So yes, even the people featured and that situation that may be brought to mind requires our compassion. Even the person or cause that we may disagree with most strongly is part of this extensive idea of Buddhist compassion. No one and nothing gets left out. There is no other in this equation, which is why there is no competition. If Buddhism were a company, the mission statement would require that everyone get the product according to their needs, with the profits shared equally. If you think these ideas may take a little while to get accustomed to, don't worry. This is an aspiration, not a commandment. It's something to be worked toward, cultivated in incremental steps. Naturally, because it's challenging everything we're taught from the basics of the family structure, which provides for its own prosperity, through to our education system that teaches us to market ourselves for maximum return on our educational investment, through even to nationalism that attempts to convince us that our nation, people, or community is the best. This idea of an expansive compassion with no limits can be a bit difficult to accept. So that takes us to the why, and the why of these ideas is always important. Meditation without compassion. What happens when there's no compassion? When we remove compassion, consideration for others, from meditation or spiritual practice, we bear a significant risk of creating something focused only on our needs, comforts, advancements. In other words, an escape from the world, others, and unpleasant sensations. We risk creating something that is a delicate refuge from the world, not an engagement with the world to solve problems. We may find ourselves saying things like, "I just can't meditate with that baby screaming in the adjacent apartment," or we struggle to shut out the world and our thoughts that we think are distracting us from meditation. That looking at the thoughts and seeing what they can teach us about ourselves and our insecurities and root worries about life are somehow not part of the meditation process. We become concerned only with maintaining our serenity and comfort. Buddhist practice requires investigation of where our emotions are placed and what they are doing to us. Part of how we do this is not forgetting others, working for the benefit of others, sharing our practice with others by remembering them in everything we do. This compassion, bodhicitta, reminds us of this because it teaches that our potential for enlightenment, our interest in being free from discomfort, distress, having the causes of happiness and peace, are inherent qualities of being human, and therefore aren't unique to us but are shared by every person, those we care for, those we don't know, and those whom we struggle to generate positive feelings towards. If the same energy that is pushing us forward is present in all beings, and, as Buddhism teaches, that we live in a massive, interdependent, and connected web of associations, how can we draw a separation between ourselves and others? In fact, doing so, or attempting to do so, cuts us off from seeing through our own illusions and the basic truths of the world in which we live. So how is this idea of compassion specifically expressed within the Shingon tradition? Shingon is no different from other Buddhist traditions on this point. But perhaps what is unique is a focus on apprehending the truth of reality according to the ability and interest of the practitioner. Shingon's founder, the Japanese monk Kukai, placed an emphasis on not excluding any aspect of teaching, whether secular, non-Buddhist, or Buddhist. Rather, he utilized the best aspects of each, encouraged people at all levels, while constantly exhorting them to not neglect compassion. Rather than reject any school of thought or philosophical perspective, we can say that Shingon takes the perspective that all are needed at some stage, and when the individual is ready, when both the conditions are right and the interest and capacity are present, the flower of one's true nature can open a bit more. If we think of human life and human beings as all being on a journey, bodhicitta is the motivation and fuel to propel the practitioner onwards toward enlightenment. Forgetting that critical energy source runs the risk of stranding the practitioner without a critical resource, or creating a three-legged chair that has some of the aspects and qualities of Buddhist practice, but when leaned on in a certain way, becomes unstable and can topple over. So there is a constant exhortation to cultivate and not neglect compassion, bodhicitta, both within Kukai's writings, mainly to encourage the practitioner toward the highest goal in Buddhism. So here we see an attempt to provide the practitioner with a complete roadside assistance package, so to speak. So ask yourself, does your meditation practice include compassion? Are we mindful of when we don't feel compassion? Are we mindful of when feelings that are the opposite of compassion arise within us? And I think at this point it's fair to ask, does this actually help others? How can this feeling or energy that we develop really help other people, maybe even those that we don't have physical contact with? As is the custom with Buddhist practice, when we complete a practice, we dedicate the merit of that practice or sitting meditation to all sentient beings. Does this help? Is this practice useful? Can it actually aid other people? In a basic sense, we are continuing to cultivate compassion by connecting our practice with others, working to remind ourselves that this practice is not just an escape from something else, and planting the seeds of cooperation, acceptance of others, and uprooting the weeds that we've cultivated thus far that support such feelings like righteous anger, indignation, and outrage. At the very least, and I do mean very least, we change ourselves, which changes our reaction to others. Each time we engage positively with others rather than engaging negatively, or perhaps worse, with indifference, I think we appreciably change the world for the better. As always, thank you for listening. Please consider subscribing on YouTube, our Facebook page, adding your name to our email list for future events, possibly even in a location near you. Thank you.